prepare for, and this is what we pray that we never have to do.
We got to take back extra drugs. They shouldn't be sitting in your medicine cabinet.
Facebook should have had a way of verifying everything and not being sloppy about it.
Although the intelligence is uniform that no votes were changed, they weren't doing it for fun.
I had a call with President Putin.
Calling him wouldn't have been high on my list.
We're going to see the spending bill soon.
We're in good shape.
Come to the well if you've read this language.
As far as the content of the bill, this could have been written by President Obama.
This was manure management. Keep us in the dark and feed us manure.
I will never sign another bill like this again.
This can be a very mean-spirited town.
This is the longest interview on Fox that I've ever had.
This $31,000 table had been bought. I said, what the heck is that all about?
Thank you for your willingness on a snowy day to travel through this town that sometimes understands snow removal, sometimes doesn't.
What advice would you give to the 25-year-old Donald Trump knowing what you know today?
Don't run for president.
1 week. Make sure this weekend to tune into Fox News Sunday. Chris will have an exclusive interview with the Treasury Secretary, Steven Mnuchin. He'll also have some of the students in that protest that they'll be here in Washington all weekend. You'll hear a lot about that as well. Thanks for inviting us into your home tonight. That's it for this special report. Fair, balanced, and unafraid. Make it a great weekend. The story, hosted by Martha McCallum, starts right now. Martha.
Good to see you, Brett. Thanks. So breaking tonight, in fact, just moments ago, Andrew McCabe has published a stunning editorial in the Washington Post. In it, this piece is titled, "Not in my worst nightmares did I dream that my FBI career would end this way." He goes on to say, "I have been accused of lack of candor. That is not true. I did not knowingly mislead or lie to investigators. When asked about contacts with a reporter that were fully within my power to authorize as deputy director, and amid the chaos that surrounded me, I answered questions as completely and accurately as I could. And when I realized that some of my answers were not fully accurate or may have been misunderstood, I took the initiative to correct them. At worst, I was not clear in my responses, and because of what was going on around me, may well have been confused or distracted," he writes. He goes on to say, "For that, I take full responsibility. But that is not lack of candor. And under no circumstances could it ever serve as a basis for the very public and extended humiliation that of my family, and me, and the administration and the president personally have engaged in over the past year. Not in my worst nightmare did I ever dream that my FBI career would end this way." Let's bring in Catherine Herridge with this breaking news tonight. Chief Intelligence Correspondent, also getting a look at this, and she has covered this story from the beginning. Catherine, good evening to you. Your thoughts on these very strong words tonight from the former Deputy Director of the FBI?
Well, Martha, I can't remember a time when a former FBI director has written such a personal op-ed in a major national newspaper about his termination at a top law enforcement agency. What jumps out at me, and I've just been skimming through it as well because it's new and within the last 10 minutes, is how he talks about he learned that he had been terminated at the FBI after 21 years, not from the Department of Justice, not from the FBI, but he says third hand from a friend of his who saw the news breaking on one of the cable networks. And I want to draw your attention to this one section. He says, "So after 2 decades of public service, I found out that I had been fired in the most disembodied, impersonal way, third hand, based on a news account." He goes on to criticize the president pretty openly in this op-ed. He says that he woke up the following morning, March 17th, to find the president was celebrating his termination. And he called that, I'm reading from again, "unhinged public attacks on me that would continue into my life after my service to the FBI. President Trump's cruelty reminded me of the days immediately following the firing of James Comey, his old boss, the head of the FBI." On this lack of candor question, Martha, his explanation for what happened, there has to be more to it for the Justice Department and the FBI and their Internal Affairs Division to have terminated him for cause. And I think it's worth reminding people that when the former National Security Advisor Mike Flynn was fired, what those close to him told reporters is that he also was kind of caught up in the confusion and the chaos of the new administration, and he didn't remember the sequencing of events that well from his phone calls with the Russians, yet he still was prosecuted and pled guilty to lying to federal agents. So it's a very similar story, and in this case, McCabe is asking us to believe that this was an honest mistake and that he should not have been punished for that, Martha.
I mean, it's a great point, Catherine, because it's impossible to completely separate those two things. It appears that when you're dealing with internal investigations within the Department of Justice, lack of candor is the term that is used in this other case for lying to the FBI. And everyone knows that you can't lie when you are being questioned by the FBI. And as you also, I think, rightly highlight, this was an internal investigation. He is responding to how the president responded, and clearly a lot of people have said that the firing could have been handled much better. But the reality of it is, in terms of how this works, that it was an internal Department of Justice investigation that led to him first being sidelined and then ultimately fired, correct?
Yes, and what I find extraordinary is that he has published this piece in the Washington Post, and this is coming just about 48 hours after his old boss, FBI Director Christopher Wray, told NBC News that the termination of Andrew McCabe was totally by the book and by the regulations. So this op-ed on its face is really challenging the version of events that was presented by Wray earlier this week.
Just one last question for you, Catherine, because I want people to understand, what he was accused of. What are the things that surfaced in that report that forced his resignation, his stepping aside, and then ultimately his firing?
Okay, so the Inspector General was charged with looking at the handling of the Clinton email case by the FBI and the Justice Department, and they also looked at media leaks. In this particular case, there was a conversation with a reporter at the Wall Street Journal in October of 2016, and that's kind of where there are different views on what happened. McCabe says he was within his rights to talk to that reporter about the Clinton email investigation and the Foundation investigation, and that he had the approval from his top boss at that time, FBI Director James Comey. But if you read the Attorney General's statement very closely, what you'll see is that the language does suggest that there were other occasions that McCabe appeared to lack candor in their conversations with the IG. So based on my reading of the statement and just what I've learned through my reporting, I don't think it's limited to this one episode of the media leak in October of 2016. I think basically there's more to it.
All right. Catherine, thank you so much.
You're
Glad
welcome.
to have you here tonight.
Sure, of course.
Joining me now, former CIA Director James Woolsey. Sir, very good to have you with us this evening as well. Having spent your life serving the country in our intelligence bureaus, as leader of the CIA and several prominent positions before that, your reaction to this very unusual, as Catherine points out, editorial that has been put out there tonight by Andrew McCabe?
Well, I think there are two things going here, and they clash. One is that it is understandable to have perhaps a very slightly less demanding standard for an internal investigation than for an external one. The internal one, you have to do better than just not lie. You have to have, it sounds like from the statement, full candor. And that's, I think, an appreciably tougher standard to have to deal with. And is something that could lead to confusion and lead to people being argumentative about the questions they're being asked. So I think that one, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
And it is also important to consider some other factors, what Mr. McCabe may have said at other times about various things.
Right.
And that's part of being an FBI agent. You have to respond to your boss's questions, even if they're questions about nuance. And you put those two things together, I think, and you have a really very difficult set of judgments to make, and I'm glad I don't have to make them.
Let me ask you this, because this is potentially part of a larger piece, because you have James Comey admitting at one point that he released information to the media with in an effort to get it out into the bloodstream, and in fact to prompt a special counsel because he had these concerns that he didn't want to bring out himself. You have James Clapper, who, at least according to the House Intel Committee, they believe that he leaked information to CNN about the dossier. He has since said that that's not true. But you have these three, some of the most powerful people in our intelligence agencies all being accused of leaking things to the media that had potential political underpinnings as their goal and motivation.
Well, I can understand people getting lost in the nuances between candor and lying. I have a difficulty understanding how one can deal with this situation. It's really extraordinarily difficult, I think.
James Comey, at one point in his testimony before Congress, he was asked, have you ever leaked anything, any classified information to the media? He said, no, never.
Well,
go ahead.
That's pretty clear cut and clear denial, and there may be things that took place that are clearly on the other side of that, and therefore the judgment could be made. But all of this is swimming in a very murky stream, and I don't envy the investigators who are trying to sort this one out.
Troublesome allegations, to be sure, and I'm sure, having spent your life in intelligence, it's
overrode any of our thinking.
So the president's critics today say that he got rolled on this one, while Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi are celebrating. Corey Lewandowski on whether or not they're right, coming up.
When someone watches the news, they want someone they can trust. Our job is to cut through the talking points.
We're going to ask the tough questions because there's a lot of conventional wisdom out there that needs to be challenged.
What I'm doing is making sure that whatever is developed through the day, people are fully informed from coast to coast.
We're 24/7 news, but we're really down to the minute.
We're going to be fearless. We're going to be fair.
Whether it's 4 a.m. or midnight, we're there.
All across the country.
This is for my dad.
A live look at President Trump arriving in West Palm Beach, Florida this evening to spend the weekend at his weekend place in Mar-a-Lago. Been quite a day for the president. Tonight, he vowed never again, reluctantly signing a $1.3 trillion budget bill. Watch this.
There are a lot of things that I'm unhappy about in this bill. But I say to Congress, I will never sign another bill like this again. I'm not going to do it again. Nobody read it. It's only hours old. Some people don't even know what it is. $1.3 trillion. It's the second largest ever.
Nobody read it. Don't you love that part? But a number of Republicans are questioning exactly what the GOP got out of this deal and whether Mr. Trump, as some have said today, got rolled by the Democrats.
This is Ann Coulter reacting, Jennifer. She tweeted out, "Congratulations, President Schumer," essentially saying that the president got played here. "I will never sign another bill like this again." She's quoting from the president. "Yeah, because you'll be impeached."
This president promised to drain the swamp. He's a jobs program for the swamp. He says he's going to drain the swamp, but he's the best thing that's ever happened to the swamp.
The Democrats really got most of what they wanted in this bill. Democrats weren't necessarily opposed to more defense spending. They just didn't want to give defense spending until they got a lot on domestic spending, and they got most of what they wanted.
They sure did. Joining me now, Corey Lewandowski, former Trump campaign manager and chief strategist at America First Action. Corey, good to see you tonight. President's getting a lot of criticism on this from his base and from his supporters who believe that basically the Democrats did get everything they wanted in this very fat bill and that there's no fiscal responsibility happening on his watch at this point.
You know, what the president said today when he signed that bill was he was very disappointed in what the bill had in total. But there were some key components of this legislation that are important, and let me just highlight a few of them. $650 billion for the military. That will allow our men and women in uniform to get the first pay raise they've had, the largest pay raise they've had in over a decade. You know, we're talking about 24 new Navy ships. We're at the smallest Navy we've had in a lifetime. We're talking about 90 new aircrafts, new F-35s. We're talking about opportunities to rebuild our military so we can continue to be the world's greatest superpower. But in addition to the military, this bill funded $6 billion to fight the devastating opiate crisis, which is wreaking havoc across our country. We need to get this under control. Is this a perfect bill? Absolutely not. Did the president say it was a bill for national security? It is a bill for national security.
No,
but I'm very concerned about the amount of spending here. I don't like this spending.
Last night he sort of stunned, I think, a lot of people at the White House by coming out and saying he was going to veto the bill. Then this morning there was this whole scramble. He's going to do a news conference. Then he wasn't going to do a news conference. Then they moved the reporters from the press room over to the diplomatic receiving room. And he gave, a straightforward speech. I think that there's a feeling that he didn't do what he wanted to do here initially. His gut was telling him that he should veto this bill. He had a lot of his supporters who wanted him to do that. So the question tonight is what happened?
I think you might be right. I think his gut was telling him that this was a bad piece of legislation. Many of the things that are in this bill, he campaigned against. And what we've seen once again, it's amazing. You know what Congress did? They went home again. The government's about to shut down. They put one piece of legislation in front of the president. They say, we put a gun to your head. You're going to sign this or we're going to close the government. It's going to be your fault. Why haven't we been able to keep the government open for a multi-year period? This is astonishing to me.
Yeah, but Corey, what about those people who say you've got Republicans in the House, Republicans in the Senate, Republicans in the White House? We thought this was going to be a fiscally responsible White House and administration, and they're wondering what the heck is happening.
Well, look, I don't disagree with you. I think 85 or 86 members of the Republican Party voted against this bill, and they're going to pass with 111 Democrats voting for it because the Democrats do what the Democrats do. They know how to spend money. Look, the next generation, our kids, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren are saddled now with potentially $22 trillion in debt. It's unsustainable. This can never happen again.
Well, that's what the president said, and I thought, I think a lot of people thought he hit it on the head when he looked at that thing and said, they just finished this bill hours ago. Nobody's read it, and we're at the deadline. And this is the way we do things. I think people look at that across the country and say, are you kidding me? That, this is such an inefficient way to do things. Corey, as you're talking, we're watching the president walk down the steps of Air Force One. Looks like a beautiful night in Palm Beach as he begins this weekend. So you have a good weekend, too. Okay? Thanks for being here.
Thank you. You too.
All right. Thank you. So one group that was especially unhappy with this budget is veterans. They saw new health care provisions allowing them to choose their own doctor stripped because the bill just hours before it passed the House, that part came out. Pete Hegseth, U.S. Army combat veteran, co-host of Fox and Friends Weekend, and spends a huge amount of his life and his time supporting the veterans of this country. So what happened?
Well, what happened was the swamp happened. I hate to say it that way, but first of all, on the larger deal, the president's Achilles heel is the military. He wants to fund the military. He saw what happened under Obama and the decimation of sequestration. That's why he voted. That's why he supported this bill, even though a lot of us hoped he might veto it. Ultimately, at the VA, you had included in the bill was an opportunity for vets to choose their own, a doctor or the VA, a private option, which the president promised. At the last minute, Representative Tim Walz, he's running for governor in Minnesota, he's a Democrat, and Nancy Pelosi conspired to pull it out of the bill and instead increase more funding at the VA, which we've seen time and time again. So you add more money to the VA.
They took away the choice.
They took away the actual reforms that would give veterans real choice. And instead they said, let's add more funding. And they hoodwinked a lot of people at the last minute to do so. So again, it's how the swamp works. At the last minute to make a deal, Democrats, to get their votes, to get more money, said we're going to take out the real reforms that would have advanced the president's agenda in exchange for more money. And then Democrats will say, we help the vets. They're not helping the vets. And the president's heart is in the right place, but he's signing this bill because he supports the troops, and the vets are in a tough spot.
Here's the political question, which is what Ann Coulter was talking about when she said, congratulations, President Schumer. And, here comes impeachment. Because the fear is that this alienates the people that support him and have supported the people who, they believe are going to vote like him.
Sure.
And that you're going to end up with people who are in the middle deciding that Democrats are a better choice for them, like we saw in Pennsylvania with the Connor Lamb election. And, he's going to lose his majority, which hasn't, has worked well in some ways and not so well in others anyway.
I feel like today may have been the day that the party of fiscal responsibility in the GOP died. I mean, there isn't real commitment to that today at all. If you're not committed to fiscal responsibility, then at least be committed to reform. And from the VA and across the board, you saw them give away the farm in exchange for defense spending, which I'm supportive of. I understand why his heart is in the right place, but he lost on so many other places because members of Congress, whether it's Mitch McConnell or Paul Ryan, don't want to fight the fight and bring it to the brink. And that's why a veto could have done that. I understand why he did what he did, but we gave away a lot, and you're going to have to fight to take a lot of that terrain back.
Yeah, I mean, they got so burned shutting down the government.
If Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer love it,
they're terrified to go ahead and to push that button again.
But they won the last one, Martha. The last shutdown was won. Chuck Schumer knew and then they've got the item of DACA and the wall. I think it's a fight he can win, but I understand where he's at.
Thank you, Pete.
Thanks,
Good to
Martha.
see you at night.
Appreciate
Thanks for coming in.
We'll see you in the morning.
All right.
Sure.
Coming up next, the real story behind the Cambridge Analytica Facebook scandal, why it may not be the bombshell on corrupt campaigns that seems to be reported out there. My next guest knows firsthand how these things work. Former Director of Research and Analytics for the Cruz campaign. He says it's not what it appears to be.
Feel the clarity of non-drowsy Claritin 24-hour relief when allergies occur. Day after day after day. Because life should have more wishes and less worries. Feel the clarity and live Claritin Clear.
You might take something for your heart or joints, but do you take something for your brain? With an ingredient originally found in jellyfish, Prevagen is the #1 selling brain health supplement in drugstores nationwide. Prevagen, the name to remember.
It's the buy one, get one free paint sale at Ace.
Our biggest paint sale of the year.
Buy a gallon of our top paint brands and get one free.
And you know what else is free? Our help.
With the Ace Extra Mile Promise, if you don't get everything you need in one trip, we'll bring it to you. And the delivery is free.
Don't miss the buy one, get one free paint sale. Get great savings on our top paint brands, Valspar, Clark & Kensington, and Royal. Now through Monday, only at Ace.
Ace is the place with the helpful hardware, folks.
This is where life expresses itself as an endless flow of energy. Are you ready? Atlantis, Bahamas at heart.
Book by March 31st for the best summer rates at 1-800-Atlantis or AtlantisBahamas.com.
Long John Silver's lets you skip your trip to the same old, and indulge in the different new. Like our classic Alaskan cod and shrimp basket for just $5.99. Change up what you're used to at Long John Silver's.
It's 6 a.m.
40 million Americans are waking up to a Gillette shave. And at our factory in Boston, more than 1,000 workers are starting their
No more college students should die for just wanting to join an organization.
The parents of Timothy Piazza making an emotional plea today, calling for more strict punishment for hazing suspects. Their son, Timothy, died in February of 2017 after a night of heavy drinking and hazing at Penn State University. He was left to die by the so-called brothers who were supposed to protect him. Today, Jim and Evelyn Piazza, alongside Pennsylvania State Senate Majority Leader Jake Corman, unveiled proposed legislation called the Timothy J. Piazza Anti-Hazing Law. The bill calls for more harsh penalties for people caught hazing. It requires that schools have anti-hazing policies and reporting procedures in place, and that it keeps students and parents in the know about what's going on their campuses. At the same time today, in the courtroom behind them, a preliminary hearing on charges against 11 members of the now shuttered Beta Theta Pi fraternity. Today was the first of several hearings that will determine if there's enough evidence to take that case to trial. We're keeping a close eye on this story, as you know, and we will continue to tell you all of the developments. Also developing tonight, new questions about what, if any, role Cambridge Analytica actually played in the 2016 election. The acting CEO for the consulting firm says none of the data that was mined from Facebook was actually used, saying in part, quote, "Please, can I be absolutely clear? We did not use any GSR, Global Science Research data, in the work we did in the 2016 U.S. presidential election." Here now, Chris Wilson, former director of research and analytics for the 2016 Cruz for President campaign. He's also CEO of Wilson's Perkins Allen Opinion Research. Chris, good to see you. Thanks for being here tonight. You know, this story sort of has, you know, all of the potential drama that I think a lot of people are looking for in it. But when you start to peel back actually what was in this data, whether or not it was actually used and whether or not it was actually effective, it appears that there's more to the story than meets the eye. Your thoughts?
Well, it is. I think the Cambridge Analytica story is a bit tough because their marketing efforts are so overblown that you kind of have to separate what they did from what they claim they did, from what they claim they can do, from what they actually can do. And all those things come together and create a very confusing story for anybody who's just sort of listening to this. As you mentioned, their acting CEO, the reason there's an acting CEO is because the former CEO was suspended for making outrageous claims on camera about hiring Ukrainian prostitutes. I mean, that's just, it's probably so outlandish and probably never happened, but that's just the kind of thing that happens. And as he was quoted saying today, marketing is not done under oath. And so I think you've got to really kind of look at what exactly is being contended here. Well, the first part is whether or not psychographic data, which is what Cambridge says they do, was used during the presidential campaign. And they say they didn't do it for Trump. But even if they did, this research is all based on, or the psychographic targeting is all based on academic research on ocean scores that is been widely published and is available open source online from several universities. So this is not something that is some sort of secret sauce that is being done by a supervillain. Like I said, it really is, even if it was effective, the fact of that it would have been taken from Facebook, I think, is outlandish in its face, and now they're saying that it wasn't anyway.
Yeah, and both the company and the Trump campaign say that none of the Facebook data was used in anything that they did. Now, the Cruz campaign also hired Cambridge Analytica at one point. Did you find their information useful?
We did. They were a data science staffing firm for us, and they had very good data scientists. The people that were on my team in Houston, I think, would define themselves as really Cruz for President employees, even though that's where we got them from. From an overall standpoint of their data, let me be clear, is there are several sources that a campaign gets data from. And without boring your listeners, I'll just tell you that there are between warranty records or there's several companies that sell this type of information, and you can get multiple pieces of data on a person. Now, the Facebook data is kind of where this all comes down to, and if there was something that was done that was wrong, it would be Cambridge gathering Facebook data under the auspices of using it for academic purposes and then repurposing it for campaigns, and that would be unethical. The Obama campaign used Facebook data in 2012. It was 100% legal for them to do it, and so did many corporations used it. And now, but the way they did it is by saying, share your information with us on the Obama campaign and let us talk to your friends, and then you chose whether or not to do that. You weren't doing it to take a personality test or for academic reasons. But that wasn't really Facebook's fault. That was somebody doing something unethical if it occurred that way. Yeah. And then the way that which they used it would be the other part of it.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of questions, as you raise, about whether or not this whole psychographic thing works. Both Alexander Kogan, who did some of this research, said they found it didn't really work that well in terms of determining or being able to influence someone's voting decision. The Trump campaign has said that they also found something similar. So, Chris, thank you very much. Just the tip of the iceberg on this, but we'll keep digging. Thank you very much. Good to see you tonight.
All right. Thank you, Martha.
So coming up, you know, attitude can be everything, and one familiar face here at Fox is living proof of that. Senior meteorologist Janice Dean is here to share her personal journey battling a potentially disabling disease. But first, the untold true story behind the infamous Chappaquiddick incident is now about to hit the big screen. We'll go behind the scenes with the movie's producer on telling the story which nearly derailed Ted Kennedy's political career. Then Chris Steyerwalt on why he says this movie is part of a larger cultural reckoning. Tonight.
What do we do to help the senator?
A dead body holds a lot of secrets. Those can be the difference between guilt and innocence.
Are you saying that there's a possibility that maybe she didn't drown?
COPD makes it hard to breathe. So to breathe better, I go with a Noro.
COPD tries to say go this way. I say I'll go my own way with a Noro.
Once daily Anoro contains two medicines called bronchodilators that work together to significantly improve lung function all day and all night. Anoro is not for asthma. It contains a type of medicine that increases risk of death in people with asthma. The risk is unknown in COPD. Anoro won't replace rescue inhalers for sudden symptoms and should not be used more than once a day. Tell your doctor if you have a heart condition, high blood pressure, glaucoma, prostate, bladder, or urinary problems. These may worsen with Anoro. Call your doctor if you have worsened breathing, chest pain, mouth or tongue swelling, problems urinating, vision changes, or eye pain while taking Anoro.
Ask your doctor about Anoro.
Get your first prescription free at Anoro.com.
Steinmart's famous 12-hour sale is here with huge store-wide savings. Get up to 50% off hundreds of spring sale items like famous brand dresses, shoes, bedding, and much more. Plus, save up to 75% off all clearance items this Friday and Saturday at Steinmart.
We believe in rock and roll. We believe in blasting it down the fairway, turning up the heat and the fun.